Check, check. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another show where we only talk to men about men stuff. I'm just kidding. But man, it's nice sometimes like today. I'm just kidding. Maybe not. Nah, I am. So today we have 4 white guys. 3 out of the 4 of them straight, 2 out of the 4 divorced. And I want to make sure you guys, specifically the ladies out there looking at the title, you don't see it as, hey, we were hurt too, sort of deal. The reality is we were. For the record, I believe that ladies got the shorter end of the stick. Yikes, these sex episodes, it's like everything you say reminds you of sex. Or maybe that's if you think like a middle schooler still. But I believe women were screwed. Damn it. God. Affected more poorly by purity culture. So I want to make a special note of the type of show that Pastor with No Answers is. One of our hosts today referred to Jesus as a slut. He actually thinks that Jesus went whoring around. Conversation, we value it. I don't think Jesus was a slut. I'd say it's even an offensive thought, a knee-jerk reaction to me sort of thought. But I want to talk about thoughts. And oh yeah, Ox is fam, so try it. Try to say something. Matt Oxley is also part of the Pastor with No Answers family and team, queer and dating a trans person. And I say that because in this episode, I actually felt that I made a joke in poor taste, apologizing to Oxley after he said he didn't remember. So, the question is, can you find the joke that I believe lacked tact and sensitivity? Also, we are not making any guarantees about F-word bleeps. We're probably going to wean off of them unless Mrs. Maddie texts and complains, and I'm serious, I will change it back. So, lastly, join our patrons. Some of you have reached out about supporting at a higher level, and I'd always like to talk to you about that. But yeah, lots of stuff going on behind the scenes, I guess you could say, ministry-wise, that is helpful with. So reach out. Would love to talk. Lots of stuff going on. I don't feel like talking about it and right now. Check out the show notes if you want to know more about being a patron. But I will say one of the big things is we help people through DonorSee. This month in lands far, far away, we helped a newly widowed woman get back on her feet and an elderly woman get watered the hell out of her house. I love this. Go check out DonorSee. Enjoy the show. Believe in the good in one another. I love you, and thank you for listening.
Any moment spent with you is like a street of gold, like the stories foretold or more. You make my heart believe again. At times it's hard, sometimes I forget how soft are your hands, how sweet are your lips, how tender your kiss, the length of your hair, the clothes that you wear, how we're the perfect pair. It's just not fair, but God, whoa, oh God, whoa, oh God.
It's really funny because this conversation, I had one of you like, oh boy, one of you basically said that you needed to get permission from your wife.
This guy.
So
I may get you to like it on the official notes, like put Jed P, so it's not Googleable.
Right. Hey, but I want to say, I want to give you guys a welcome, because I tell my listeners this all the time, that I'm actually going to be podcasting probably for the rest of my life. And I want y'all to know that y'all can join this podcast anytime. And I want to be podcasting for so long together that Hayne and Jed, we have to listen to Matt Oxley complain about how perverse our sexual culture has gotten.
Yeah.
Like, that's how long I want us to be friends.
Yeah. Okay. Let's do it.
Can I start with a question about how God works?
Oh.
Okay, so tell me what y'all think about this. So I had to go get a passport today, and I had to set an appointment. So I get there, they're way behind, and appointments basically don't matter, right? I would have been late to this, but the person in front of me, she goes in, she comes back out, she's like, oh, you have to have black ink, and I did mine in blue, so I got to skip her. Do you think God made her write that in blue ink so that I would be on time for this?
It's looking out for Joey.
I think it's possible, but I don't think in that way at all.
I know. I was thinking that I was like, if that mistake didn't happen, I would have been late.
I can think of a lot of other mistakes too that fucked me over. So maybe God was.
Matt, are you drinking out of a spaghetti sauce cup?
Yeah, I'm country as fuck. So
I do the same thing, and that's why I recognize it. My man, I always get clowned for that. But why are you going to throw away a perfectly good spaghetti sauce?
That's good glass.
Thank you, Classico. That's a fine choice.
Check this out. Sometimes the behind the scenes stories aren't interesting, but this one is. So I had a guy who was coming on. Just to give you a little context, if you want to talk fame, his name is bigger than all ours. That even sounds icky. It just occurred to me because I had to cancel with you guys because being sick the night before we were supposed to record with this guy. I was like, I don't know if he knows just the degree and how deep we're going to go with this. And so I just told him, I said, hey, just letting you know, we're probably all going to go into details involving our sexuality as a kid, masturbating and all that stuff. And I'm so glad that I did because I would have been in the worst podcasting situation ever. I really think that guy would have said, I'm sorry. I'm just because he texted immediately. It was just like, oh, I don't know how I would make that work. Like, just hell no was basically the consensus of his text message. But I was like, oh my gosh, that would have been disastrous, man.
That would have been so awkward.
Really awesome.
So awkward.
So I do want to go person to person, hear your story, your upbringing, having to do with purity culture or not purity culture, however you grew up in, but definitely in the context of your Christian faith. But before we do that, because I really do want to hear everybody's story, before we do that, let's just kind of warm up a little bit. I've been thinking a lot about sex lately.
Now, when you say warm up, are you talking getting some lube out?
Are we gonna feel like fluff? Get some
like
fluffers?
The philosophical, theological, like in other words, I'm gonna have a is there sex in heaven part 2 because it's turned from a theory to I'm pretty sure sexuality is not going to go away, but that's going to be a later episode. At its very core, isn't all arousal sexually, shouldn't it be framed as positive? See, as I say that, I'm stumbling because of the child predator
I
thing.
think
All
rape
right,
blows that out of the water.
Let's take that out of let's take the little kid thing out of the picture.
I don't think I'm comfortable with this conversation anymore.
We just
what all right, so let me frame this up like with a specific example. If I'm a heterosexual guy, I'm married,
could have fooled me.
Christian morals and all of that. If my first reaction to what we would all say normal, healthy sexual response, if I had sexual arousal to someone that I find attractive, at its very core, that's a good thing. For those Christians who are affirming, put two guys in that same equation. Anything like arousal is a good thing.
I would just say
itself,
it's a thing.
Correct?
I would just say
and the reason
it's the context of the arousal.
It has a moral position.
Yeah, it's the context of it that makes it either a good thing or a bad thing.
Let me just tell you why I'm even going here. I was raised where my go-to with sex was bad, dangerous. It's so bad we're not even going to talk to you about it. We're not really even going to educate you. And I'm trying to take sex at its very core. And the fact that God gave us the ability to have that sort of pleasure, arousal is built in us. So it just seems like if you start with arousal, that's not a bad thing. It's what you do with it. It really again, eliminating the extreme.
I think it would be a little misguided to say
that
it's good or bad. Like one of the things I use to teach my children about let's just use fire as an example, or teach them about anything by using context. Fire is not good or bad. It's just fire. And if fire's in my wood stove, it brings this warmth and life. If it's on my couch, we all die. So I think of arousals being similar.
Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Are you familiar with the subreddit Confusing Boners?
No.
Okay. So the basic premise of that is we have Jed on for like the intellect, to dig a little bit deeper. So thank you, Jed, for bringing that. The basic premise is this is arousing, but why? Or should it be? Or this is arousing, but I don't like it. So it's like, sometimes arousal can come with a little bit of shame or like, wait a minute, why is this? I don't want to be, but it is.
At the very least, we're panicky as Christians. It's like, okay, are we sexual beings or not? Because if we are a little too freaked out about sexual stuff. And I want to say to my listeners that I am really going to press myself to lean very liberally into these notions I've been thinking about. I don't want to apologize anymore for telling people my thoughts. So these are notions I have in my head as I'm framing up sex again, but really thinking about sex in general. Everybody messed it up.
Yeah.
Like it's everybody messed it up. And I'm curious how Matt thinks through this now that you don't believe in God. And I don't want to speak for you. That's goes a lot deeper. It seems like a big mismanagement on God's part if the evangelicals are right that this, I'll speak from a guy's perspective, if this thing between your legs is so natural and just at a certain age as you're about to explode, like sexual stuff is just crazy, it's just big, it's unbelievable, and is going to be the thing that is the worst if we mess up. Like that thing, if we mess up, is like the worst thing ever to mess up in. Like that's big. If the Christians are right, that's big mismanagement. It's like, come on, we've screwed it all up. And I honestly don't think it's just a church thing. Like I think it's church culture, secular culture, if we want to use those words. Like we've all messed up. Probably the greatest possible gift we could have ever been given. As I want to ask Matt about the God thing, I was talking to a science guy the other day, and orgasm feels like seems like one of those things. I don't understand how that evolves. An orgasm just seems to be like something God says, hey, this is a gift. I want you to be able to experience that. How does an orgasm evolve?
What are you talking about?
A penis is
how is it a
stimulated.
product of
stop.
evolution?
Penis is stimulated.
Listen.
Feelings, and it evolves into an eruption. This extreme pleasure. Is that your question?
Do you mean over millions of years? Like
yes,
how it
what
evolved?
I'm saying.
Okay.
Yes, like for example,
that's an easy explanation. It's just like you needed to procreate, therefore your brain figured out we need to make this feel extraordinarily good, or your species will die.
Yeah.
That happened way before humans.
So an organ of flesh just adapted to knowing that this has to be a very arousing.
It's the reward system of, so if you didn't, here's the thing, our brains are wired to remember pleasure and forget pain. If you only remembered the time that you threw up from food poisoning, you'd never eat again. So your brain is really good at shucking that information and remembering that delicious steak because it is beneficial for your survival to eat. So you're going to remember, you get rewards. That's how people get addicted to things, is the reward system gets hijacked. The hierarchy of needs of survival, you get brain rewards for it so that you'll keep doing it.
That's also why we get so much dopamine from eating. It's because we're rewarding ourselves.
Yeah.
Same. It's like, and how the signals can get crossed.
But I think we're talking about like physical.
I get it. I get it. But can any of y'all imagine your finger evolving into something that could just give you unbelievable pleasure? Like, I can masturbate my finger now.
My finger can.
I'd like to say that mine do.
Nice.
I'm saying if your finger turned into an organ that had that capacity, when does it start? Like, when did that organism? Something felt good, and now I'm motivated to. Like, to me, it just sounds like a
somewhere
gift from God.
Yeah, I think it was planned. Yeah. I think it was planned because I didn't plan.
Yeah. Matt, how do you think, if there is no God, I would imagine that you would see the morals behind sex a little bit different.
Oh yeah.
If we really are in a naturalistic existence where there's no supernatural, then that's a big game changer when you even talk about something like sex before marriage. Like sex before marriage. What I'm asking is, you came from the same place that we came from too. I'm curious what you think the disconnect is going to be, because there's going to be a very foundational disconnect between all of us and you, because we're thinking from like a supernatural supervision of a higher being, and you don't have that in the equation.
So you're probably cool with like murder.
I love
rape,
murder,
right? Like,
not.
But anyway, so is
right,
Joey as well.
Pagan.
To each his own. No, I mean, the way I would frame that now is I kind of approach all morality the same. Is there a victim? If a victim exists, then what you're doing is probably immoral. If there is no victim, then you're probably okay. There's no divine.
What do you do with like objectivity though? Like I guess you are your own arbiter deciding if there's a victim or not.
Well, I think you'll find out if there's a victim, if there is. I mean, I'm also a communist, so I believe that any consumption inherently has victims. So everything that we do is immoral. It's very hard.
I've got a guy on the show that says I'm a communist. I love it. I've got evangelical listeners listening to one of my co-hosts that said, I'm a communist.
You mean to tell me the atheist is a communist?
Big surprise.
But I know we're getting a little off track here, but couldn't we, of course,
I'm totally
healthy
kidding.
Communism, but couldn't we say that in a communist regime that there are victims as well?
Well, yeah, but communism shouldn't have regimes.
Right.
I'm philosophically a communist.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like idealistic communism.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, it should be, you should treat your neighbor as if you have the same interest.
Communism in theory is essentially like the Garden of Eden, right? Like it's like a utopia.
The idea of like what was going on in Russia in like the late 1800s was Soviets were being formed, which were just worker coalitions where they took control of the means of production.
Right.
Things kind of went downhill once they tried to combine all of the Soviets into one big union. That's when things got out of the control of the worker.
All right, so the new name for this episode is going to be guys, purity culture, and communism. No, I'm the one that.
But like
did it.
that philosophy,
that'd be a classic.
That philosophy drives my morality, so it's about morality.
Absolutely.
It really does feel, as I really was reflecting a lot on this, and I'm not joking around. It really does seem like the church. It's so messed up, because I think about my parents giving me a book saying, read that, them not even wanting to have a discussion. Well, why were they so uncomfortable? Because their parents were, and their parents. And now here we are, and it's like we have patience for kids as they're learning how to walk, they're learning how to crawl. But when it comes to sexuality, not only are we not helping, but we're getting upset and frustrated when people barely out of their moms are messing up with sexual stuff. So, I mean, it really feels like something that we need to hit the reset button and start framing sex up differently. That's my little soapbox. Let's all try to give our snapshot story, and let's see if we can do it in 5 minutes. Like, I'm going to really try to run through this quickly. So and it was about in middle school, I started hearing guys and they doing the hand motions like, it's coming and I'm whacking off. And I didn't know what they were talking about, but I started to pick up on, well, I think that whatever they're talking about feels good. And so I just started using context clues. So never forget, I was in the living room area. My brother was in his room. Thank God he didn't walk out on this. That'd be traumatic. I was in the 7th grade, and I just started to masturbate, and I was like, this is a joke. Like, what good is this doing? But then there was just that one little split second of, oh my gosh, what was that? And then obviously your first orgasm, it's like you discovered like the answer to life. I mean, it was just next thing, it's all consuming. I would try to watch Playboy Channel after 8 o'clock if my parents aren't there to see everything lined up and all of that. But here's the deal. This immediately turned into hell fear. Like this was already programmed in my head. So I immediately went to, this is a sin. And if I can't figure this out, I'm going to go to hell. Now, I was so legalistic to the point of, I remember helping my supervisor move out of a building, and it was a glass shelf, and I accidentally nicked it on something. And a year and a half later, I'm still asking God to forgive me because I never told him the truth about it. And now it would be weird to tell him, like that sort of legalism. So for someone that could not stop masturbating, it was like super, super scary. I couldn't stop. I'm going to hell. hell. This is like the worst sin is what everybody's telling me. I don't think I'm going to be able to do this in 5 minutes, but it's going to be close. I'll never forget in youth group, our very conservative youth pastor, by all, like everybody would raise their hand and say, yeah, he's a very conservative guy. Well, he splits it up into guys and girls. Well, the guys, we had this word scramble and we're like, what in the world is this? So we see beat your meat, and next thing the deck of cards falls. We're like, oh my gosh, this is all slang for masturbating. And so then it was just like super, super fun, like figuring all that out. Well, I was taught for the first time, and I was probably almost finished with high school, that masturbating in itself was not a sin. It was pairing it with lustful thoughts. And I'm telling you, if I did not go home that night and go to town trying to fight out the lustful thoughts, because at that point I had built up some discipline and stopping it. So it was like, oh my gosh, so it's not bad all the time. And it's crazy as I think about this guy being super conservative. He got all the parents together to talk about sex, and I'll never forget him saying the same thing about masturbating. And I looked at my dad and I was like, really? Like masturbating, that's not a sin? He literally said, Joey, what do you think that I would do if something happened to your mom? And that's like the first thing my dad was ever like forthright with his sexual life. And then hearing something that just blew up my paradigm of masturbating. It was just crazy. So I went into this stage in college where I would masturbate, but I would try to resist bad thoughts. Like I can't think about that. But every 6 months or so, I would cave. And youngster caving back then looked like getting into your car, going to the checkout counter and asking for a dirty magazine behind that person. It's always kind of awkward because they're thinking what you're thinking and you're getting this dirty magazine. So you buy something. It sucked for Christians because it costs like $15, and then we're going to get guilty about it and throw it away anyway. And for the record, I think they should be thrown away. So yeah, I would come home with this magazine, and I'm telling you, if I did not struggle with very heavy guilt and shame for like 2 days, like in repetitive, Lord forgive me, it was just awful. And now I think back, golly, I wish that young Joey Svensson did not have to go through that. Now where I'm at, I'm in a stage where I see sexuality as a powerful force that requires great care, but it has to start with good. It has to start with, this is a good thing that we mess up often, because I'm in a stage now to where I have to teach my sons about this stuff. They have access to porn in ways that we could never dream of. I've got to figure out a way to help them grow up respecting women and valuing what sex can do in a relationship, but not feeling an ounce of guilt, like no guilt at all for reasonable release of sexual tension. I definitely have explored some of what Nadia Bolz-Weber wrote a book, Unashamed, I think, and it's a very progressive treatment of human sexuality. And I would say to my listeners who are familiar with that sort of radical talk, like I'm open to it. I don't think my evangelical fundamentalism will ever let me go all the way in my sexual ethic, but a lot of it is making sense because it just seems like we've just read so much out of the Bible that just really isn't there. But that's it. Was it 10 minutes?
No, that was 7.
Yeah, Joey, thanks for sharing. Great show, guys. That's a great show. Thanks for giving us
you don't want to share with us about how you touch yourself.
Yeah, I ain't sharing shit.
You guys aren't going to share a masturbation story? Oh my gosh, that's what this was supposed to be, fellas.
Well, I was an early bloomer. I remember I got in trouble in like first grade for playing with myself in class. I didn't know what I was doing, but I got in trouble for it. So I had to have been really early to it.
Apparently. So would you say that was sexual?
Are we doing the everybody 5-minute thing, or we going something else now?
I was trying to save it because you guys got nervous.
No, I mean, I'll go. I thought Hayne was going.
Okay. No, I sometimes
going or coming.
Comes right over my
head. Sometimes I don't know. All right.
Hey, we don't keep going.
Matt, no.
Hey,
Matt, go. Hayne,
hey,
go,
real quick, we're
go.
in trouble. We're in trouble because we don't have Ellen or Priscilla or anybody to keep us in line. So,
well, Matt has got me very stimulated. So keep going, Matt.
Yeah, I got a confusing boner going on right now.
I didn't realize that you were being facetious the whole time. too good at it. But I was just a really early bloomer, apparently, because I remember getting in trouble in school when I was in first grade for doing something involving that. And I know that, like, at that age, I didn't think girls were hot or anything.
So it wasn't sexual in nature, I wouldn't say.
I don't think so. I think it just felt good. Like I had I don't want to say anything identifying, but young children who are related to me, like when they're really young, they'll like hunt things and stuff like that. So you pick it up at a really young age, you might just forget it. But I don't think I ever forgot it. So it kind of became an almost all the time thing for me when I was really young. And then my dad was real bad about trying to make me feel guilty for it. And then church made me feel guilty later on. But I never could go 6 months without it. Yeah. It's kind of incredible.
I tell you what, I was talking to someone recently. He's actually a fellow pastor friend of mine. And
I thought you were going to say fellow masturbator.
He was fellow masturbator too, I'm sure. It really was kind of like aha moment to realize that not everybody, when they discovered masturbation for the first time, felt guilt. And so it was like the best thing ever. Like I can go to Disney World anytime I want to at the drop of a hat. Like I can't imagine what it felt like to be able to feel that and not feel guilty about it. It really is crazy to think of other people's upbringing.
I was a kid and figured it out on a pool jet.
On a pool jet?
A pool, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You're on the side
that did feel good. That did feel
good.
Community
pool.
Oh God, I'm about to share a lot of stuff, but you go.
Oh, right.
Yeah. No. I mean, Jed freaking said that you this is tied to your drug addictions that you have, that you are on the other side of. And I'm like, oh my gosh, purity culture for guys is serious too. It's messed us up, man. Jed got messed up into drugs for crying out loud.
It kind of like Matt. One of my earliest experiences was playing Batman and Catwoman in kindergarten with this little girl was my girlfriend, and we would kiss or whatever. And I went home and I told my mom about it. She was like, "Don't do that, honey. That's bad." Also, there was some.
And wouldn't you say mistake number one right there? Are we all in agreement that that's bad advice?
Yes. Yeah. But I don't. If my mother hears this, I do not blame her. She did the best she could. Right. She feels awful about that.
My mom does too.
Then there was some same-sex experimentation with friends, which I would later learn in therapy is extraordinarily common across the board. But I remember a friend's mom catching us and feeling like I had to hide something and feeling incredibly shameful about it, even though I was a child. I mean, I'm talking 3 or 4. You don't know what you're doing. But for some reason, maybe because of this God thing, I was like, oh, this is wrong. And so then around when I went through puberty, I remember I was downstairs. We were watching Skinamax. I was laying down on the floor on a pillow, and I think I just adjusted. And I was like, oh, what is going on down there? That feels good.
That was kind of cool.
That was kind of cool. And so then you just keep adjusting and things happen, right? And so we had the night at youth group when the man sexual educator and the woman sexual educator come, and they split the rooms, and the dads came with the kids and the moms went with the girls. Yeah. And I famously, the guy was going on and on about masturbation, and I raised my hand and was like, "What's masturbation?" And everybody laughed. My dad looked so embarrassed because I'd only heard it called jacking off, but I still really didn't know what it was.
Right.
And then kind of like Hayne, it was like I figured things out. The jets in my bathtub, certain stuffed animals. I mean, kids,
salad shooters,
an ottoman.
This will really get weird. It'll really get weird if Jed starts identifying who those stuffed animals were. Right now, we're good. We're good with the general concept, but if he says Donald Duck, it's shit.
No. And so went through puberty and suddenly became attractive to girls, and I started hooking up. I went by the everything but penetration loophole. So it was a lot of hand stuff, mouth stuff, but I felt extraordinarily guilty. The other big thing that really screwed my life up, I would watch porn tapes, and the thing that I took away was to pleasure a girl, you have to last for 7 hours.
Yeah.
And I whatever, dude. So I would use lotion a lot, which just made my junk hypersensitive. I was like a minute man. And I remember my first sexual experience was this. I was making out with a girl and she laid on top of me and I came in my pants in like a second. I went from having the best time of my life to I wanted her to die. Like I just felt so gross about myself. It was awful. It was awful. I figured out that certain drugs would give me stamina. It was kind of a twofold thing.
Jeez.
They would give me stamina and I wouldn't feel guilty. So
like post orgasm, you wouldn't feel guilty.
Yes, it would delay the orgasm and then it would take care of the guilt too. I mean, literally all of my early relapses were pretty much because I would get sober, go have some kind of sexual experience and just feel like absolute, like recite the sinner's prayer, scum of the earth. And I remember when I was 16, I finally lost my virginity. And I remember I immediately called my friends and bragged. And as soon as I hung up with the last one, I broke down, just like, what have I done? I have committed the most egregious sin in the world. Like, you are disgusting.
And the irony, I mean, the irony. That was originally a gift. Like, it seems like people, like, if you want to imagine what God's response is to something like that, it's like a comforting dad puts his hand on your shoulder and saying, you know what, you're probably a little too young for that. That's a little complicated. Like, that's kind of how I would see God handling that. You know what? Why don't you avoid that? Okay. And I can explain why. It's just not good for you right now. Wouldn't that be a lot better than thinking, oh no, now I'm going to go to hell and I can't talk to anybody about it either?
It ruined my early relationships because then, because I remember too, one of my, and it was always intertwined with like my sobriety. Like I'd finally gotten sober when I was 18 and I was dating this girl, but we were sleeping together and I wanted to try out for the local college worship band and I made it and we were playing. And one day I said that I was sleeping with my girlfriend and they kicked me off the worship team. Yeah. Wow. And I had to go to that girlfriend and say, hey, what we're doing is a sin. And you can imagine how that went over with her. And like, long story short, it was just like, it wasn't the only, I'm also a drug addict. You can damn well bet that amount of emotional displacement and there was a solution for that nearby. I'm going to go do that because it was just like, awful. Yeah. Awful.
Yeah, I do want to interject a huge part of my story, but I'll make it very short. Is I think purity culture ruined me and Priscilla's sex life at the get-go. It was really bad. Like our honeymoon was really bad. Many factors going into that, but that's a tough blow. The effects of purity culture on me, I definitely see as more minimal. But I had sex built up to this, like this is what my whole life's meaning is waiting for this and getting this. When my wife is emotionally spent because of some relational dynamics at her wedding, now I know as a 44-year-old man, we could probably be intimate tonight. It's just going to take some time. But at that moment, I was bitter. I was like, wait a second. We've been holding out all this time and now you're going to have like little things you're upset about. No, of all nights. And so that was really messed up for her. And I'm telling you, we were virgins. Priscilla would basically say same philosophy that you explained, Jed. And I was even more of what you would call pure. I'd say even with the guilt, one of the best times we had together was when we were checking out a potential new house, like a starter home, and we were making out. We were basically engaged. It was further than I've probably been in because I just didn't do a whole lot, but I had like the premature ejaculation. I think both of us remember that time as, man, that was so much fun, but we really didn't enjoy it because immediately came the guilt. And I think that's what most evangelicals will have high issue with. And I totally understand. That's why I'm just communicating these things in my head, but I I would have loved for Joey Svensson, and I'll just end it here. I'll say it here. I wish Joey Svensson of 2001 did not feel guilty. I wish he could have enjoyed that day and say, I'm a sexual being. I really love this woman. Maybe we're going a little too far, maybe not. But all in all, this is a good thing. Like, I wish that I could have thought that. Priscilla had a really hard time flipping the switch of, all of a sudden, this thing that created so much guilt and so much repentance and is supposed to be good now. Like anything.
Yeah.
And so it was super hard for, I'll go so far as to say, I think our sex life has been permanently altered by purity culture. I've never thought about it that way. Yeah. I never thought about it that way, but it's permanent.
And how it affected the first marriage was one of the reasons I was like, oh, okay, this is probably the one I'm going to marry, was because it was for the first time I had sex and I didn't feel guilty. And I was like, okay, so this is a God ordained thing. In my mind at that time, I was like, this isn't considered, it will be a sin if we break up, but since we're engaged and this is the one I'm going to marry, I don't have an issue with it. We get married, it became clear that we had very divergent sex drives and ideas about it. Then I turned kind of my anger toward God, where it's like, okay, so you're telling me I had all that fucking guilt for all those years. I play by your rules and I finally do it the right way,
right?
And then the person doesn't even want to. What kind of bullshit is this? I mean, I would say, like, to this day, I mean, as an adult, this idea of guilt and all that has just carried with me.
Trying to help all of our listeners understand, I'm sure most of them do, but for a guy that was raised up in purity culture, what Jed just explained is like world-ending shit. It's like monumental heartbreak. Yeah. I did all of it the right way, and what was supposed to be the best thing ever, now you don't. I mean, it took me years to get over the fact that our honeymoon sucked. Like now it's, live and learn and made us who we are now. But probably first 10 years, I was like, why couldn't we have just had a daggum good honeymoon, man?
I know.
Sure.
So I had
it's interesting.
Thing. So I met my ex-wife in middle school, and we dated through middle school, and then got married at 19 and 20. Virgins the whole time, barely doing the hand and, barely touching, just trying to be good, fit this standard that is just impossible. My honeymoon was a complete disaster, just a fucking nightmare. I ended up with blue balls, and she was in pain. It was just horrible. Mint flavored lubricant, which is should never be used the first time.
Wow.
Ow.
It'll cause a lot of pain, and it'll just end your night. But I didn't know. I don't even know if I knew that it was that. Through our whole marriage, it was always like we really couldn't meet each other sexually in the same place. We had moments where things were great, but it was very rote. It was like, this formula works for you, so we'll just do that. It took us a long time to explore anything that wasn't very, even this is long after we left the faith, Right. It took us so long to explore anything because we just didn't know what we could explore. Yeah. And I'm 36 now, and I'm just really starting to figure my sexuality out.
I know. It's the most natural, maybe one of the best things, and nobody gives you any damn guidance. I mean, seriously, who guided us?
We would, in middle school, I remember we would sit around, or in high school, we would sit around and basically, like, literally, I remember having the conversation of like, man, when you're married, you can just get as freaky as you want. Like, what a ridiculous idea.
Not if she's not freaky.
Exactly. But
bingo.
Exactly. But it was.
But you might want to know that first, that's
for sure.
Oh, I wish I had known stuff like that.
But Hayne, look, we haven't heard you.
Yeah. It's so interesting because I think we all grew up in that church purity culture, and I think we were hearing the same messages. I think I'm unique in the bunch is in that I was not getting that message at home.
I wasn't either.
I wasn't getting the message. I was getting a proactive message from my parents, and because I think I just respected them more because they were my parents, they were good people, I listened to them more. So the messages that they were giving me, they were proactively giving me, like I was encouraged to masturbate as a kid. which I know blows most people's minds, you know? I was like, yeah, you know, I've been jacking off guilt-free for decades now.
You son of a bitch.
Now, that all being said, my parents were always about context. We'll talk about it. I mean, I gave the illustration earlier about fire and the wood stove or on the couch and blah, blah, blah. And for them, I remember my mom telling me, she was a registered nurse. My parents are just super practical people. And their whole thing was, listen, I remember them being told this. You are going to come to sexual maturity 14. And you're going to have all this stuff bubbling up inside you. And it is okay for you to find releases for that are not going to put you in a compromising situation where you're going to create an unwanted pregnancy. We think that it's healthiest for you to wait until you're married. I kind of had a green light. I can remember as a 16.
I know. Me and Jed are just mesmerized right now.
That sounds lovely.
As a 16-year-old, I didn't have, it wasn't porn, but I think I had a bunch of like pages I ripped out of my mom's Victoria's Secret, and I would fold them up and I would hide them. I had this little boom box and it was a plug-in, but the battery compartment, I would take the battery cover off and I would had them in there because
I had a pencil case.
Yeah. There you go. So I had a place to hide that stuff. And I did hide it because I was warned about pornography and things like that, which I think whether you're a person of faith or not, there's a valid discussion to have about the dangers of pornography and what that's neurologically doing to you. I'll put that aside for later. But I can remember my sister borrowed my boombox and she found the pictures. Like she found them and she held them up and it's like, oh, I'm taking these to mom. Oh no. And she's running across the house and I'm behind her. Well, then I kind of stop and I hear her talking to her and she's, look at what I found. And, Hayne's boombox, played it out. And we're walking in and I felt ashamed. And my mom just kind of looked at me and smiled and she just kind of tapped them. They were on the kitchen countertop and she walked away. Didn't throw them away.
That's so sweet.
Okay.
I got the Jed, these are someone's sister. This is someone's mom.
Oh, no.
I swear.
Oh yeah.
I swear.
Horrible.
It wasn't my dad that confronted me on it. It was my mom.
Oh gosh.
Oh,
dude,
man.
y'all listen to how I was scared into this. I was told like in my 20s, if I don't figure out how to look at 20-year-olds with more pure intent and just framing it up better, which I agree that that's important. But if you don't get it under control, you're not going to know how to interact with your daughters. And that's such bullshit.
Oh, wow.
Like even if I was a porn addict, I personally would not be turned on by my girls. I would still be able to relate to them in normal ways, hugging and things like that. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
Pretty gross.
It's in a lot of ways, it's a manipulation.
Right.
Yeah. And especially, and this is the other thing that almost, it's a broad brush, but in a large number of cases, those same youth pastors that told me stuff were banging the girls in the youth group or were perving out. And it's not a judgment on them because it's just that, I guess, is just like, that is the result of this. It's just like, you cannot repress it. It is gonna come out. It was like, okay, if I can't have sex, then I got into some really weird masturbation habits, which was way more damaging.
Right. Can we ask more about that? How weird? Well, I'm curious as to
dude. I used to have sex with an ottoman. Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
I cut a hole in it and I filled it with lotion and I went to town. All right.
And that's how baby ottomans are made.
Exactly.
Hey, adding to Jed's point, so all of my most of my career has been pastoring, and it's been in an evangelical context. And I'm telling you, all the couples, I'll say maybe I have done counseling and officiated maybe 30 weddings, and these are 20. I would say 85% of them, you would say, oh, these are evangelical couples, like they kind of believe that way. I think 1 out of the 30 couples were not having sex already. That's what's so crazy is it's the thing that we talk about the most, and it's the thing that we don't do what we're saying the most.
Well, that was my question about quote unquote modern Christianity. What is the prevailing mindset these days? And my other question too was like, okay, does the Bible specifically forbade it, or is it just a translation thing? Because American marriage today is not marriage back then, and the old classic argument of like, show me Adam and Eve's wedding certificate.
Right.
So
go further on that, Matt. That was interesting.
I think it was just an obsession Paul had with sexuality, and that kind of became the prevailing thought for a long time. And I think a lot of things that are prevalent today in Christianity are just situations that allow you to control people. So
granted, though, if I go through the lens of God's commands to us are for our own good, and having been someone who has gone down the road of having tons of partners versus being monogamous, it is like the latter road is one of heartache and feeling like hurt and pain. That is terrible. Like, I get it. I do see how it is better. And I guess I'll just speak for me. It's better for me personally to be with one person. So I can from that perspective, I can see how, yes. And there is no pain like being married, for example, and then having to imagine that person sleeping with someone else. For me, that is a very gut wrenching pain.
I wonder if it's possible, because I'm looking at this through theological lenses. Like, I obviously see the Bible a lot differently than I did, but it's still a go-to. I'm interested, and I haven't done the research. Every time sexual immorality is talked about, I wonder if it had to do with unfaithfulness, cheating, and lying. The word adultery, for instance. I wonder if it was a sin for a husband to look at another man's wife, or a wife to sleep with another woman's husband.
And back then, wasn't like pederasty and things like that more common?
Yeah. And it seems like the rules were pretty much locked into, don't mess with anything that hasn't been given to you. And I say that to men and women. Like, if you don't have your spouse, then that's not yours. Other than that,
but then you have all the concubines the famous Christian fathers had, right? Like, didn't some
concubines and all the polygamy?
Yeah. I think,
also,
is it not weird that God didn't just like set that place on fire? Like, if this is as big of a deal as we say that it is, it seems like God's like, I'm going to send another flood. Here comes flood part 2.
Apparently, like in Martin Luther's day, and someone on the internet fact check me, but it is my understanding that there were church prostitutes to basically handle the needs so that you don't fall into sin. And that was like an accepted thing. The Catholic priest thing is a whole nother display of how repression of something like that doesn't really work, and it leads to perversion.
Yeah, absolutely.
It just seems like there's a whole lot of stuff that we've kind of taken the freedom to teach us, one thing being okay and another. It just seems like, man, like it seems like we think that we've been told more than what we have been told.
And I think that they're making such a huge deal out of sexuality. Let's put it this way. I think that pelvic sins are low-hanging fruit. I think it's a very low-hanging fruit, literally and figuratively.
Mine is low-hanging. You know what I'm saying,
fruit.
Boys?
Yeah, but it's such an easy way to control. Like, how do you control someone's greed? That's simple. Well, have you jacked off, or have you sexually immoral? Have you had sex with these people? Have you done? It's just so low-hanging fruit that the church could use to control.
Yeah, that was my question: was why? Okay, like, why did this become the marquee issue? Yeah,
I think it became the marquee issue during the moral panic of like the 50s and 60s. Like, that's when it became so prevalent in Christianity, because the idea was the godless communists are just
don't call yourself that,
to procreate, and we have to be able to have a good standard family structure of people who will get jobs and pay taxes and continue to do that for the next 100 years so that we can kill the communists. I really think that a lot of it in American culture is because of like Jerry Falwell's crusades.
Wow. Oh, the irony!
Yeah,
once again,
yeah,
that makes a lot of sense.
It does make a lot, and it makes me so angry to think that my life was irrevocably changed because of an agenda. And it's like that kind, like spiritual abuse like that. And I'm not one of those people that looks back at my church and just feels like I got screwed, no pun intended. I truly believe they had the best of intentions. I don't blame them. My youth group and my pastors and my parents, they walked out what they believed, and it was not malicious. I truly believe that, and it helped me in as many ways as it hurt me. But that specifically, though, to just think that such a seemingly small thing could have such far-reaching impacts in my life is incredible.
Yeah,
because it's touching on something that's innately programmed inside you.
Yeah,
it's something. Part of the essence of who you are is your sexuality. It's so deeply connected to us in our own identity, and for that to be manipulated for good or for bad, although I would argue that any manipulation is a bad thing, but for something to be screwed with to the point screwed. It's amazing how much of our language is connected to sex. But so much of who we are wired to be, our sexuality is such a strong part of who we are, that when that starts to get skewed and wonked, man, of course it's going to do a fucking mind job on you and your identity.
It just seems like we took so much liberty. Like, for example, have y'all heard of soul ties? Soul ties. Okay, so soul ties, kind of a doctrinal terminology in the evangelical world, means whenever you have intercourse, and this is only what Hayne would call P and V. This isn't anything other than that. Basically, when you do that, there is a connection. There's a soul tie. She takes a part of you that you can never get back, and you took a part of her that she can never get back, and it can be problematic in your marriages.
HPV.
And it's like the apple with all the bites taken out of it. Did y'all get that?
What a terrible. What a sexist illustration.
Do you want to give your husband this bright, juicy apple or this disgusting apple core?
But seriously, where did that come from? Where did they get that advanced of a teaching on something that they called soul ties? And I think the places that I'm really pushing on, and Hayne, you were part of this conversation as we were talking about the movie 12 Years a Slave, two people in really, really bad situation. They could possibly die a slave, and they have a sexual encounter. It was very gratifying for them. And then they felt very sad, guilty, repentant about it. That to me just doesn't work. I don't understand why they needed to feel guilty. That to me seems like we've gone too far away from the simplistic aspect of sex being. It's a gift. It's a gift.
Well, I'm also, and maybe this, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, like old fashioned or conservative beliefs.
And I have all of that. I'm sure I have all of that. Yep.
I'm also not ready to denigrate sex down to just this thing that doesn't matter. And it's as simple as giving a handshake. I do think it is spiritual in a way. I do think it is. And maybe that's, I could be completely wrong, and maybe it is just like bumping butts, but to me it doesn't feel that way. It does not. And I don't like the pendulum swing to where now it's, everyone and their grandma has an OnlyFans and trying to normalize pornography and just everything. It's like, I do think it's a little more sacred than that. I'm not ready to just like, what do you think about that, Matt?
I mean, I may or may not have an OnlyFans.
Hell yeah. Let me get that sub, son.
Nice.
And are you called the communist?
That's a good idea. That's still trying to figure it all out.
Jed, let me interject real quick. Jed, I think that the key is, you said that it shouldn't lose its sacredness. I would say that moment in those slave quarters that movie depicted was a win. It could have possibly been something not to feel guilty about.
Yeah, and I haven't seen.
It could have been.
I need
sacred.
to watch that.
So basically, it could have been a sacred moment. I think so, but I know that's way out there for evangelicals. I mean, bottom line, what happened, Jed, is they may never get out of slavery. One of the guys is married. He was kidnapped, brought down south. He may not ever see his family anymore. A woman.
Oh, so he technically cheated, but it was like this extraordinary circumstance.
Yeah. It just seems like a bright light in the sky in this shithole that they're in. Like, maybe that's something they can be happy about. But I get it. I get it.
Do we? So this is another thing that is very uncomfortable to talk about for people. But okay, if Jesus was fully man, like, did he masturbate? Did he have?
I think he was
wet
having
dreams
sex with a lot of people.
What's your
Talk
why?
about that.
I think he was hanging around 12 guys all the time, and all of the women that may or may not be associated with that. There's no way, in my opinion. A religious leader. Can you think of a religious leader in recent history that isn't fucking half the congregation?
Gandhi.
Like if you're like
he did that stuff to tempt himself, but he never.
Yeah, he's kind of an elected one, I guess. But like a messiah figure.
All right, title update: purity culture and guys, communism, and Jesus had sex with all the women. All right, so that's
where you were going.
He's also suggesting the men, Joey.
I thought you were going to say
who were his favorite.
Oh, gotcha.
It's just obvious to me that
who were the two closest disciples?
Sexuality going on.
Interesting.
Going on.
Greet each other with a holy kiss.
You got to compare this historical narrative to Messiah people now, people that call themselves Messiah now, and most of them have a sexual element. Messiah,
and that is where I would argue that really strictly due to my faith, that is another tally in the why he was different, because I believe that he was different than these other. Messianic figures, but I can see your point for sure.
I don't think Jesus was God. I think he's like cool as really cool, and I believe in the things that I actually think he was teaching. But I just think a lot of that's been kind of discombobulated.
I think it's a 30,000-foot view. This where the conversation has moved to. I think it's kind of safe to say that there is no one size fits all for any of these scenarios. I don't know how it could not be an emotional connection for me, but I have friends that they claim, and I trust what they say, is that it is meeting a hunger and a need, and they move on, and that's okay. That's fine. And we get into dangerous territory.
Do you believe that though?
That it is immoral?
Because what you're basically saying is, if it's consenting and you're not hurting anyone, then casual sexual relationships. And
I think that it is fine. Personally, I do. And I can totally get on board with Matt when he said if there's not a victim. I think the question that we have to ask deeper though about that victim piece is that even though two people may be consensual, could someone then begin to feel like a victim if they've begun to feel emotionally connected and the other person wasn't?
I was going to say, and this just sprung to memory, one of the other things that really influenced my association of like sex equals a bad thing was late 80s, early 90s Bible stories like Samson and Delilah, David and Bathsheba, slasher movies. One of the themes was the people that have sex die first. I remember watching the original miniseries of The Stand, where Satan seduced this one girl and they finally had sex, and that was like the evil thing. There was this X-Files episode where these witches seduced this man, had sex with him, and killed him. That movie Species, where they used sex to kill. And it was like, I was so heard that message where it was like, sex is this like lusty temptation, and if you give into it, your soul is damned or you're gonna die, sort of thing.
My world was rocked one time so I'm a big Clemson fan. It was the first Clemson game ever. I was in 8th grade. My mom was like, "Oh yeah, he's an elder from his church. Like for sure, I know those guys, and you can hang out." Me and the fellas, I think we're in the 9th grade. We were just joking around. It was during the time where in the hotel lobby you see little VHSs that you can rent and go take to your room, where there's one called Malibu Beach, like probably some 70s that I would say it's probably considered porn. And we weren't reading into it or anything, but we were just like, look at the pictures on this. We need to do it. We let that joke turn into, we finally crossed the line, and it's like, let's get it. Talk about my world exploding. We go upstairs into our hotel room, and
where is this going?
Here we are watching.
You just said exploding and talking about
we're basically watching a porn with grown men. So 3 grown men, me, and then my 2 buddies. I thought this was supposed to be bad. Like, what in the hell is going on? And I masturbated in my sleeping bag, of course. But my whole world, I was like, what has just happened? It's so crazy how things like that stick out in your mind. Like, I'll never forget just how off that all seems, A good expression of where I'm at navigating this sort of thing is I'm not locked into fear anymore. And And I think I've told this story on here before, but I'll never forget there was a really attractive woman jogging my way. And I could tell even from afar that she was attractive. And I totally, my mind went to the default Christian route. Like, don't look at her body parts because that is a bad thing and you can't do bad things. You know what? I'm going to not look at her because I wouldn't want her to pick up on me looking at her feeling like, oh, this guy. And I want to respect her as a person, not as just a body part that's about to jog by me. And I'm telling you that I jogged by her with the biggest smile on my face because I felt like I avoided what we'll call sin, but it was completely motivated by love. Like, it wasn't about what I can or can't have. It was, I don't want to make her uncomfortable. And it is disrespectful just to look at her boobs, for instance, when she jogs by. But that was a big one. That was a big one for me.
Do you think if you would have jogged by and seen that you could, because I know where you're coming from, you could have used the energy that created to push that towards Priscilla?
That is a really, really good question. That's a really good question.
Because I think you can.
Now you wouldn't take that to the next level of watching porn before you have sex with your spouse.
No.
You're talking about sexual
context
energy.
Is everything.
Yeah.
Context is everything.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you could look at it just from an animalistic perspective. There was this woman who was near your wife's territory.
Yeah.
And you have to go make sure she knows what's up. That she's still the king or the queen tiger here.
Yeah.
We're just animals, guys. That's all we are. We want to fuck. We do.
Oh, I can't get enough of your love.
This is Robbie Madison, my friend and one of the co-hosts of the show. Sometimes I forget. Go to Spotify or iTunes and play it 1,000,000 times, baby.
Of your love. Oh, at times it's hard. Sometimes I forget how soft are your hands, how sweet are your lips, how tender your kiss, the length of your hair, the clothes that you wear, how we're the perfect pair. It's just not fair, but God, whoa, oh God. Oh God, whoa, oh God. Sometimes I forget how soft are your hands, how sweet are your lips, how tender your kiss, the length of your hair, the clothes that you wear, how we're the perfect pair. It's just not fair, but God, whoa, oh God, whoa, oh God, whoa, oh God.
Yeah, do put Jed P in the notes just to preserve my professional.
P, yeah.
I busted out the fucking an ottoman story for you. So
I think Matt's on it. Don't put Jed P. Just type Jed Penis. I think that's
Jed Penis. Jed Peen.
Peen. Perfect.
And the stuffed animal was like a 2-foot tall penguin.
Yeah, that changes
Happy
things
feet
for sure.
Yeah,
I was always told that a heated watermelon is a good.
My friend's grandpa was like, "You boys ever go melanin?" And we're like, "What?"
No.
Oh, he's like, "Oh yeah, we'd go down to the watermelon fields at night on summer."
Please tell me everybody's still recording right now.
And we just go to town on them watermelons.
Wow. I never heard of that. A bunch of old dudes recommending it to children.
This is
That's what they did back in the day.
This is like
down
Lord
to the
of
melon
Flies.
patch.
Oh,
Lord of the
man.
Flies.
Southern culture, we're never going to catch a break from stuff like that.
Yeah, bro.